Welcome to the Sunday Spark, the ARCUK show, where every week, every Sunday, we bring you a new person from sort of broader objectivist movement to talk about them. And today we have somebody you probably have seen already on the channel quite a lot, and it's Anders Ingemarson. You've seen him on the reality show for quite some time now, but today we'll talk to him about something you might have not known. And with that, thank you, Anders, for joining me today. And why don't you start with just telling people something about yourself? We will, of course, go into the specifics in a bit, but just sort of like a broad overview.
Sure, I'm happy to. I'm happy to be here. I live in the United States, but I'm an American by choice. I was born and raised in Sweden. I discovered Ayn Rand in 1990, found a box set of Atlas Shrugged in Swedish at a book sale, and like many others, I was completely consumed by what I read. And after a couple of sleepless weeks, I had made my way through the book, and I know it's a cliche, but it changed my life. And I continued in at a rapid pace to read the rest, most of her other books. A couple of them were available in Swedish, others were not. And back in the early 90s, when this was, there wasn't really an internet, so it took a little bit of a detective work to find where you could get her books and learn more about her. And then I came to the US for a couple of conferences, and I was fortunate to work for a Swedish multinational company at the time. So I managed to get transferred, stayed with them for 3 years in the US, spent a couple of years in education, and then after moving to Colorado, spent the rest of my career in IT.
So yeah, there's a lot of things to go to. I guess I would start. Um, I mean, that always interested me about the people who say they've discovered objectivism, and I think it's the same with I think Yaron Brook has the same story of like being angry, like throwing the book because he couldn't, because he was like a socialist and he couldn't like convince himself that there might be some other truth. And at least for myself, when I discovered objectivism, we already had the internet. So it was very easy to, oh, this one person says something, I can go look it up, I can go read every book. But how was it to sort of, yeah, discover it when, I assume that nobody in Sweden, probably even now, talks openly about objectivism. How does it go to basically, yeah, discover it and sort of like know like, wow, this is something that I want to
Yeah, so my,
completely.
my reaction was different from that of your aunt's, and perhaps yours. I looking back at it, so I was 30, so I was actually discovered Ayn Rand pretty late. Um, but I think I had a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. I had been in my teens, flirting with socialism like most Swedes do, and then there's something happened, and I realized, you know, this doesn't work. And then I kind of shifted my political alignments to something more liberal, or well, the right in Sweden is kind of where the Democratic Party is in the US. So there isn't much. Well, today there is something further to the right, but political right. But I also found that very unsatisfactory. And so I think when I read Ayn Rand, it was like a lot of pieces falling into place. Of course, I had questions, and it took quite a while to understand the scope and so on. And I mean, I'm a lifelong student of objectivism, and that will never end. But for me, it was more of a revelation almost, and I mean, it makes so much complete sense. Apart from those few question marks, and even with so much making sense, I kind of assume, or not assume, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt where I maybe was not in complete agreement, and just decided that I need to research this and find out more. And actually, to the point of objectivists in Sweden. There were actually a couple of objectivists, or a few objectivists, back in the early 90s, and I have them to thank for, for introducing me to many of the other works, because one of them, Henrik Unne, he was running a book service where he was actually selling both the Swedish translations of Capitalism and the fiction, and also the English originals that he actually back then imported from the US. So that made it a little bit easier once I found him. But after that, I ordered books from the US and taped courses and other things.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and I guess we could go a little bit into what do you do for work and how that played a role in sort of because I assumed you had your career before discovering objectivism, or at least well, tell us how was it when it comes
Yeah,
to
so,
your
so I was not a star student in school. So I in the European system, high school we call gymnasium. And after high school, I started working. So I worked for a CPA firm for a couple of years after doing my mandatory military service for 1 year. And then I went to business school. So, and after that, I worked for a couple of different companies. Uh, I always liked working better than going to school. Going to school was, apart from my first 3 years in elementary, and my teacher back then, I credit for, saving my life, because she was amazing. But after that, it was just a long drudge the whole way through, even including business school. And looking back at business school now, basically what you learned was to accumulate a lot of material and do a lot of work. Uh, but it was nothing like a principled education or anything like that. So it was a ticket to the Swedish corporate world, basically. That's pretty much what you got. So yes, I worked, and then the company I worked for when I was well, I actually moved to Denmark, lived there for a couple of years. I worked for IKEA. Lived in Switzerland for a couple of years, where met my wife, and then we moved to the US in '94. And so I'm forever thankful for that opportunity from IKEA, because I came here and stayed 3 years with them in exchange for a green card. And that, as we know, is not that easy to get hold of. So I am forever thankful for that.
Yeah, and I do want to go a little bit more into your moving, but first, I do have a quick question about, I guess, the Swedish culture, because I think there is like a difference between a lot of European nations and sort of like American culture. And one little thing I know about Sweden is, of course, the founders of Spotify were
Mhm.
in Sweden, and I'm not sure if you saw the documentary, or so it's sort of
No,
like
I didn't. Yeah.
it's more of a like drama documentary, and in both of those, both Martin Lorentzon and Daniel Ek were seemed incredibly American almost in their way of like
Mhm.
wanting to do, like wanting to build something in Sweden, like realizing or like knowing that the people are here so we can build something great. So what is like the culture there, especially because now I think Spotify moved out of Sweden, since it doesn't seem like it's a sort of like friendly environment for
Yeah, no, so I haven't really followed Spotify, but I mean, Sweden has a long and interesting history. So if you compare European countries, including the British Isles, on a scale from more to less collectivist, Sweden probably ends up on the less collectivist end. It's still very collectivist and statist, but it less so than others. And I would explain that at least partially by the fact that Sweden had a very strong Enlightenment period in the late 1700s, 1800s, and actually industrialized early and was at the time, comparatively speaking, a very free country. And actually, that is what allowed Sweden to ascend to pretty much the top of European countries in terms of wealth and yeah, in terms of wealth and standard of living. Um, People today mix that up and think that it is the Swedish model, this socialism or democratic socialism, what you want to call it, that is that you have to thank for that. But actually, Sweden got rich before it started to experiment with those disastrous policies. There is actually a very interesting, there's a Swedish author, Johan Norberg, who has written a number of books on progress, and he has also written a piece that you can find online about the Swedish Enlightenment, which, for anybody who's interested, is very interesting and revealing. And actually, leading up to pretty much to the start of the early 20th century, 1900s, Sweden was on a trajectory to become even more wealthy. Taxes were low, regulations were comparatively low. But then slowly but surely, socialism started to seep in, and that culminated. It's basically peaked in the 1970s and 80s when it got so bad that the economy tanked, and they had to backtrack. But to answer your question, otherwise, I think there is very little or questioning of the welfare state. So most Swedes, they like the welfare state. Uh, they don't think outside the box. So when you run into problems with having to, tweak your pension system or your healthcare system or things like that, it's always within the parameters of the welfare state. And there is a kind of pragmatic approach. So they say, oh, we will run out of money in a number of years. So they changed the system so that it's kind of now, I think it's more based on how the country is doing than a fixed income system. So if the country does well, then you get more of a pension, and if it doesn't, you don't. But there's no questioning of whether you should have a state pension system in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting how we sort of have this like less collectivistic scale, because the even the fact that you said to me that in Sweden, if you do not have the money for it, that you do make some changes. That is to me sort of like surprise. In France they usually set the fire on country when they talk about like lowering retirement age. In Slovakia specifically, we have like 14 retirement checks. Basically, you get one every month, and then you get two extra once a year.
Oh yeah, that's like how it works for Central European companies. In Germany, I know in France you get the Christmas bonus or something like that. So okay,
Yeah,
that's
but here it's
interesting
a
too.
here it's
No,
a state thing.
yeah.
Uh, And well, I guess that already sort of builds a platform for your move to the US. But I'm wondering, how did you make the decision, and basically, what did you consider? I mean, you said you moved to Denmark, and then you moved to Switzerland, with Switzerland being one of the probably freest countries in Europe, depending on your criteria. But in many of them, it wins. So, what convinced you to, uh, you know, doing that step in a sense, going from
Well,
Switzerland?
I think it was basically so I used to be your average America bashing Swede, you think it's a shallow country and people are smiling a lot, and when they have no reason for being happy and things like that. And then yeah, it was basically a result of reading Ayn Rand again. She opened my eyes for both the history, or primarily the history of the United States, and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the morality of the whole system, and then obviously how that developed to the greatest country on earth. But I also know that there were problems, just like Ayn Rand when she arrived here. There were a lot of surprises that disappointed her. but I think I moved here with open eyes and basically wanted to find out for myself, what the U.S. was about. And yeah, my wife and I, we never looked back really. I mean, we're obviously we have a lot of problems, and the country is slowly getting worse, as we all know. But I have so far there is no other place where I would rather live. And if the U.S. goes to hell, then there is nowhere to hide any longer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think currently, again, personal story, a lot of Slovaks are experiencing the same thing because when politically things go bad in Slovakia, everybody moves to Czech Republic because it's basically the same language and
Yeah,
it's like easy to do. And now they had a bad election, so now it's like, where are we going now?
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
but yeah, well, a little bit more about sort of the immigration process. I'm wondering how hard was it? I mean, you said I suppose it was some sort of work visa, which I assume is a
Yeah,
little
so
bit
I
easier.
was on, and I don't remember exactly the letter, but I got a visa, a managerial visa, that basically that I was that the company couldn't do without me in the U.S. or something like that. And they had the immigration lawyers that took us through the green card process, and really the only hiccup was so anyhow we got the green card a year after we arrived. I held off a little bit because I arrived a few months before my wife. We actually got married in LA at the recommendation of our immigration lawyers because they told us, you know what, you should probably get married before Maria goes back to Europe. She visited me over Christmas, and because it will make it so much easier for her to come in on a one-way ticket. So we managed to do that. So that was just the two of us and the judge. But hey, we're here 30 years later, so it worked out pretty well. But anyhow, so yeah, so it was compared to most immigration stories you hear. I had an incredibly smooth process. We had the immigration lawyers from the company that supported the process, and then 5 years after we got our green card, we applied for our citizenship, and we thought it would be held up by 9/11. We applied before 9/11, but at early 2002, we became American citizens.
Um, I guess so. You already said that because I know now there is some question about the green card holders, which thankfully you are not anymore since you did become a citizen. Why did you decide to go that route? And yeah, I'm really wondering about how, and I'm sure many Americans are also wondering what it takes to become an American citizen, especially after 9/11. I mean, that must have been a different
Yeah,
world.
so there is this story that, excuse me, that you may have heard and many others have heard. I think it originates in your part of the world, but it was about this little, and there are probably different versions of it, but the one I heard, I actually heard, was told to me when I went to my first objectivist conference in Williamsburg, and it was actually on July 4th that I decided that I wanted to try to move to the U.S. The objectivist professor John Ridpath gave an amazing talk about Virginia, the Virginians, and the founding of America, and yeah, that moved me. But then the story goes as follows, and it actually was in Hungary in '56, and this little boy who adored his father, when he heard that they were going to flee Hungary and go to the U.S. And I mean, he didn't question the decision, this young boy, about going, but he said, "But why are we going to the U.S.?" And his father said, um, "We have always been Americans, son. We were just born in the wrong country." And and that story resonated with me, and I kind of decided that, or realized that I was probably more American than Swedish in that sense, and it was time to come home.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that at least I see a bit unique about America. I think I remember, I think it was even the Reagan's last speech he gave as president, which was something like, you know, you can go to France, but you can never become French. You can go to Germany, but you can
Hmm.
never become German. But anybody can become
Yeah.
American. And yeah, I guess I just wanted to mention that. How was the process itself?
So there's obviously always adjustments. Most people who move abroad um, or move abroad from or away from their home country, they seek out their fellow countrymen um, for community, and for a lot of people that makes a lot of sense because it provides a certain safety and familiarity, if you like. Um, we never did that, Maria and I. Wherever we moved, first of LA, then Philly, and then now in Colorado, we always found an objectivist community, and then we basically found friends and acquaintances that we liked to socialize with, and then that we shared common values with on some level, regardless of where they were from. I had experienced it working for IKEA and visiting many countries in Europe, that Swedes who spent a few years abroad, and most of them obviously with the intent of moving back to Sweden at some point or another, they socialized with people, their little group of Swedes in that country, that were people that they probably would never have socialized with back home, so they kind of defaulted to the Swedes when there were so many other opportunities to find people and learning to know people from other countries, but they didn't take advantage of that. So that was part of why we never seeked out a Swedish or a German, because my wife is German, a German community here in the US. So that I think we never missed the Swedes and the Germans. And as I said, there were always a core of objectivists that we met with on a regular basis. So that helped. There were surprises. I was surprised about the religiosity of the US, because coming from Europe, that was something in the past. And yeah, I had gone to Sunday school, and my mom and dad thought that that was probably good for me, but I pretty much discarded that in my teens. Uh, but the fact how religious America was and still is, and it's very polarized here. Some studies say that America is getting less religious, while those who are religious seem to get more religious. And the second part that really surprised us was the how much race is still impacting American society, and the shadows of slavery and Jim Crow, um, uh, which in Europe, yeah, there's a lot of ethnic and tribal sentiments, but at least in Sweden or in the circles where I grew up, it was never really an issue.
Yeah, I know. The only thing I know about Sweden when it comes, I believe you do have some in the or what are sort of like considered indigenous, the Sami people, but
Yeah.
that's a completely
Mhm.
different thing. It's just interesting. Well, something I of course want to go to also is your book, the Think Right or Wrong, not left or right. That's it.
Yes,
Um,
that's correct.
so I guess well, first, when did you even originally publish this book? Because I know there's a couple editions.
Yeah, the
And
first edition came out in 2020, and then the second 2022, and then 2024.
so when did you originally had the idea and what inspired it?
So I started blogging back in 2013, and covered a lot of topics similar to what I'm doing now on my Substack, andersingemarson.substack.com. And at some point, I thought that maybe I should try to put something in a book, and I thought there was a little bit of a void. So while this is obviously builds on on objectivism and what Ayn Rand has taught me, um, it's not a book explicitly written for objectivists. I mean, for objectivists, a lot of what they read in the book will be, I mean, kicking in open doors. Hopefully, objectivists can get a benefit out of it in the approach of the book and it takes and showing this spectrum of morally right to wrong rather than the political left to right that we're familiar with. So the morally right to wrong, has individualism, individual rights protected, capitalism on the right side, and then all forms of collectivism. And collectivism comes on a spectrum from bad to evil on the other end of the spectrum. Um, so I tell people that it's a good book to give to your relatives and friends who are fighting over the Thanksgiving dinner or something like that, and maybe they, regardless of what side they come down on politically, reading this book may at least provide some additional input and food for thought on thinking about the world in a slightly different way.
What do you think mainly drives this left versus right mentality? Because it's really hard, and I see it even, I mean, in my own country, everywhere, that almost like every issue is pretty much split in the middle, and it really does seem that, like nobody has a desire to even sort of either come together or even acknowledge that sort of the other side might have some good things.
I think it goes back to the tribalism and collectivism in different forms that we just haven't shed yet. The Enlightenment put a big dent in it, with the founding of the United States and so on and so forth. But collectivism continues to rear its ugly head, and we just haven't. I mean, objectivism hasn't penetrated society enough yet to make a fundamental difference. I think you could argue that objectivism has slowed down the decline, so to speak, and I'm pretty sure it has actually, especially in the United States, um, and then indirectly in other countries who look to the United States, if not for inspiration, but for reluctantly following its lead. But Europe, and I assume most parts of Africa and Asia are still at heart fairly collectivist, at a societal level. I mean, that doesn't prevent people from being entrepreneurial and individualistic in their pursuit of happiness. I mean, that's a universal pursuit that most people try to make the best of in their lives. But when it comes to organizing society, that individualist spirit has yet to take hold in earnest, it seems.
Something I'm wondering about this right-left divide, and to what extent it might be a little bit unique to America, since you do actually have the two parties that are basically no third party really has a chance to win. So you do indeed have this two institutionalized sort of blocks. And something I'm wondering about is, if somebody is, let's say, voting Republican or Democrat for that matter, it doesn't matter, is there is this thing that if you like criticize your side, in quote, the ones you vote for, you're basically putting down and giving a higher chance to the other ones, right? If you are critical of your own party, basically the other party sort of gets advantage. If they are also, in a sense, it's like a prisoner dilemma, right? Like if I'm
Mhm.
critical of my party, but they are not critical of their party, then they are sort of like gaining over me. So in a sense, it incentivizes this tribalism. And again, I saw it in my own country where the party I vote for the most, they had like a little bit of a scandal that didn't, that was like really small compared to everything the other ones have been doing. And it was really weird thing for me to like then come in like, yeah, that is a problem. When it's like, for me, it was like this small thing compared to like this giant thing. But I'm wondering if that is the start of tribalism, that basically once you compromise your own principles towards your own representatives, you're basically giving in to tribalism. It's a bit of a longer question, but I'm wondering what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a really good answer for that, or any solidly formulated thoughts on it. I mean, in terms of what I'm writing about in the book, of morally right or wrong, it's basically, uh, yeah, as opposed and as entrenched as many seem to be party-wise in the US, there the trend, I think, is that the parties, the two parties, two main parties, they're losing members, you know. So it used to be a higher percentage of Americans who were affiliated with the two parties. So I think it's the diehards that remain, and they are probably, I mean, they're valuing party and person over principle, and fundamentally that shows a lack of integrity, a lack of independence. um, so I think in terms of the hope for the future is that there is a lot of supposedly independent people or unaffiliated here in the United States who don't feel at home in either party. Now, that doesn't mean that they're individualistic in the sense that we
So
would
no,
like.
no Bernie Sanders.
No, no, exactly. No, they're still, defaulting to a lot of collectivist and especially altruist principles in terms of their morality. But I think they're, at least they may be open to an argument more than the the noisemakers on both the left and the right that seem to dominate the political scene today.
So, anything you'd like to tell us in the end?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. So thank you for having me on, and I look forward to seeing you and a lot of our viewers and listeners in California in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's in 2 weeks, basically less than 2 weeks, 13 days,
Yeah.
October 25th, 26th, the Irreplaceable Spark Conference. You can check out objectivism.co.uk to find out more about it. Anders will be speaking there, so you'll be able to meet him, you'll be able to talk to him, and of course, listen to his talk as well as many other people. So hopefully, people can still have a chance to sign up. It's in Southern California, specifically Orange County, California. It's close to the airport, so you don't even have to go that far to get to the hotel.
Hotel even has a shuttle, so you don't have to walk at all.
Yes. And with that, as you said, people can check out your Substack, which is going to be in the description. Of course, your book and anything else you'd like to send people to.
No, I think that's it.
Well, with that, we have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And we also had a super chat on earlier show last minute from Gail. Thank you so much. She said, I can't imagine what comes next. Thank you for your dedication, gentlemen. This was to James and Mark. So thank you for that. And we were talking about the ceasefire. So yeah, we'll see what happens. You'll be able to see, of course, Andres later this week as well, since he will be on one of the reality shows. And with that, thank you, Anders, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye bye.
Thanks for having me.